Imagine spending up to $100,000 to renovate your house, and in the end, you end up with your house being trashed, deadlines are not met, and you have nothing to save for it. The house is still unlivable after spending so much money. Well, this is what happened to me. Hello guys, my name is Tiffany and welcome to my channel. If you're a homeowner, a real estate investor, or anybody who is interested in renovating their house, this video is for you. And in today's video, I'll be sharing a personal story of how I hired a contractor to renovate my house and spent up to $100,000 in the process of the renovation and ended up having a horrible results and a horrible journey. So I'll be sharing that with you, but most importantly, I will provide steps on what you can take to prevent this from happening to you. So back in 2021 in Toronto, there was a real estate boom where the house prices were skyrocketing. There was multiple bidding wars, and I wanted to purchase a property even before the pandemic, but I had saved up enough money now that I thought I could afford to purchase a property. So I did. It was intended to be a rental property, so I purchased a duplex, but it was a century-old house and it needed a lot of renovations. So I needed the multiple kitchens to be redone, flooring needed to be done, drywall needed to be done, and I wanted to create like an extra bathroom and change the layout of the space a little bit. So I needed a really good contractor, and my real estate agent at the time had recommended a contractor that he trusted and was and did work for a good price. So before going into purchasing this property, I was interested in real estate investing, so I read a lot of books, I watched videos and did my research on how to hire a contractor. I spoke to my real estate agent and he said that he had a friend who could do the renovation at a good price. Then all my research and knowledge kind of went through the window because I was at this point I put a lot of money on the down payment and I was looking for a good deal to renovate the property. So when I met the contractor, he seemed very relaxed, laid back, and he made me very comfortable. I thought, okay, I can work with him. I trusted him. He was of my nationality, so I thought, he'd look out for me being a young, new investor, an immigrant to the country trying to better myself. So we decided to make a contract to renovate my house. After sitting down with my contractor, we went through all the work that needed to be done and listed them. And he quoted me $80,000 with materials included. And mind you, this was during the time where the cost of appliances and lumber and everything was so expensive. So when he told me $80,000 to renovate multiple bathrooms, multiple kitchen, do flooring and drywall, I thought that was a good deal. And if he was somehow able to source the materials, then it would be great. So I thought that was a great deal and I decided to go ahead with him. The duration of the job was to take 3 to 4 months. Deep down, I knew that the price of $80,000 was too good to be true, but at the same time, I was just very happy to find somebody that was within my budget and that made me feel at ease and that I could trust him. So I was just hoping that he would do what he said he would do. But boy, was I wrong. So at first, everything seemed great because he started to do some demolition and the place was looking a little bit more cleared out. But soon after, I realized that he wasn't coming as often as he said he would. So I was working full time and I lived an hour away from the rental property, so I couldn't be there as often as I'd like to. So that's probably mistake number one, not being able to see what he was doing often. But I knew that he started off well, but then he started coming once or twice a week, and then there'd be like a few weeks that he would only show up once or not at all. And that's when things started to become very concerning because he started to slow down on what he was doing. So he would come and do like one thing and then he'd show up another week and then do another little thing here and there, but it wasn't significant and it definitely wasn't going to meet the timeline that I had given him. So at this point, I called him and I followed up. I said, you're only coming once or twice per week. I don't think you're gonna meet the deadline. And he said, I have another job that I'm doing, but I'm gonna try and prioritize your house. I'm gonna try and come this week as often as I can and get the work done. So he would show up about 2 times during the week, and then he would disappear again. At this point, it was 4 months in, when the project should have been done. The thing is, he did enough to make it seem that he was doing something, but it wasn't enough to, like, it wasn't finished. It was like the place was just not finished and it needed more work. So he asked me for 20,000. So I had given him $20,000 to start the work, and then at this point he asked me for another $20,000 for materials. And then I gave it to him, hoping that this would encourage him to finish the work, because like he was kind of not even halfway, but like he started a lot of things, and it seemed like he just needed to really spend some good quality time, and then he would be done, say, in 3 weeks if he came there every single day. So I gave him another $20,000, hoping that he would have the money that he needed to do what he needed to do. But again, he came for a few days and then he ghosted me again, so that didn't really work out. Now a year has passed and things weren't done. The kitchen was half done, just the flooring was done and the outline of the kitchen was made. The bathrooms, they were partially done. The floorings were partially done. He didn't do the drywalls. The house was such a mess and his work was just so sloppy. Him and his workers would leave their trash everywhere. So there'd be coffee cups everywhere, water bottles, there'd be alcohol bottles. At one point I came to visit the home and there was like food in the fridge that was going bad. There was a frying pan on the stove that was uncleaned, and there was just trash everywhere. And at one point I thought maybe there was somebody living there. There are nights that I would drive by the property and see that he left the lights on or the windows open in the winter time. So it was just like really chaotic, and I was just losing all hope, and I just was mentally and physically drained. So this was my breaking point where I decided that was it. I'm just gonna let him go. Like, if I have to pay someone else the money to do this whole process again, it's worth it, because my mental health was being affected, my physical health was being affected. The house was like a year in and it was just still unlivable. It was just like filled with, like, it was just horrible. The aim of this was to buy a property, have it renovated in 4 months, and then have renters come in and make some money while doing so. But this ended up being like a money trap, and it ended up being my worst nightmare, and I lost so much money. And I lost money not only from hiring him, so it also cost me an opportunity cost, because I was paying over $4,000 a month on the mortgage and utilities. If I had saved that money, I could have put it back into savings for another property, or I could have invested it in the stock market, where I could have bought index funds and build my future wealth. So this really affected me in multiple ways: mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, and it was just like the worst thing at the moment that was happening to me. Even though I wanted to fire him and start it off fresh with a brand new contractor and just a brand new peace of mind, I looked at the place and I'm like, deep down, I know that if he had spent like 3 weeks just being there like full time, he would have finished the work. And the thought of starting all over again, as I had mentioned before, was just really so daunting. I sat down with him and then I had like a heart-to-heart talk, trying to pull at his heartstrings, trying to explain like, the things that he's doing and how it's unfair, and where for him to put himself in my shoes. And then it seemed like he had understood, understood where I was coming from. Again, I was being an immigrant, as I mentioned, to Canada, just trying to, do well. So after speaking to him, it seems like he decided, like, okay, I'm gonna commit to this property and work hard. Well, that's how I understood it based on what he told me. And he said all I needed was another $20,000 to finish the upstairs bathroom, and him and his guys were working on it. So they were almost finished the bathroom, and he said he just needed some more money for materials, and he promised me he's gonna get it done. And then he did finish the bathroom, but then he started to ghost me again. So that's when I said, you know what, you can only be beaten up so many times. And I said, I've had enough. And I sought out my lawyer. I got an official document to release the contract. I forgot to mention to you guys that he was actually storing all his work equipment from other jobs in the big garage that I had in the back of my house. So there was like scaffolding materials, he stored his motorcycle, like all his work equipment, like filled up all the space in my backyard. And he didn't even ask me permission to store all his stuff there. So basically he was using my property to store his work equipment without permission or even without paying me for doing so. So now that I think about it, the whole experience, you may not be able to relate to this specific story, but it's like if you were in a bad relationship for years and you committed so many time and energy into the relationship and you want to leave, but then you just feel like, okay, this person can change. I think that was the relationship with my contractor. You know, he was so close to finishing. I had invested so much time and energy and money into it. And I just, you know, the thought of starting over was just very daunting to me, but it was the best thing to do. And I wish I had done it sooner. So as hard as this story was to experience, I feel that I needed to share the story to you guys to show you how, if you don't do your proper due diligence and go through the steps on finding the right contractor, you can really end up in a bad position where you're just spending a lot of money and you go through a lot of stress for no reason. So let's go through the criteria of the things that I think are most important when you're hiring a contractor. The first step in hiring a contractor is making sure that they have the proper license and workers' compensation insurance. The thing is not to choose a contractor based on the cheapness of their price, because if the price is too good to be true, it actually is too good to be true, and it will cost you a lot in the long run. So don't choose someone because they're cheap, because you will get cheap work and it will cause you a lot of stress and hardship that you could have avoided in the first place. So do your research to see how much of the work that you're doing would cost and how much the material will cost, so that you kind of have an estimate of how much of work that you're asking for would cost. So don't choose a contractor that is cheap, because then you'll end up with cheap work. Third thing is get references. So if you're choosing a contractor, at least get 3 references, right? Once you get the 3 references, ask some questions like, 1, did they show up on time to the job? Did they ever change the price from what was initially set? Or were they asking for more money up front? Or were they asking for money that's not within the timeline? Did they finish the job at the time that they said they would? How do they work? And ask if they're organized. Did they throw out the trash after doing their work? Like, did they clean the space, or did they leave the trash within your house? And then most importantly, ask the references, would you hire this person again? So these questions will really give you a hint of the character of the contractor and the type of work that they can do. The fourth most important thing is having a detailed contract. So that is the work that is to be done, the timeline that the work is supposed to be done in, and also a breakdown of like who's paying for the materials, what materials will be needed, and the prices of the material. This will be important because it provides a guideline so that you and the contractor can review to make sure that things are done and that things are done in a timely manner. But also, if it comes to the situation where you have to get legal involved, then this would be a good proof that this person did not follow the contract, and then this would be the consequences of not following the contract. The fifth thing is communicating and documenting everything. So set an expectation with your contractor of how you prefer to communicate, or what works best between both of you guys. So if you prefer for him to send you pictures after every time the work is done, or weekly, then set that expectation. But for yourself, when you go to visit the property or your house, just make sure that you take pictures of everything that's completed, the before and the after stage, and make sure that you save all the pictures and the text messages, just in case, again, if there become an issue where he's not performing or he's not producing quality work, then you have this as evidence. The sixth criteria is to know when to walk away, and walk away early. In my situation, you saw that I stayed too long to work with a contractor that I had false hope and belief in. So if the person is doing poor quality work, they're not sticking to the contract, they're not showing up on time, and you just don't feel good about what they're doing, then it may save you tons of money, thousands of dollars actually, just walking away and starting over. If you go through the process of sticking around as long as I did, morals starts to become affected. You start to lose trust in the person that's working on your home that you're paying money to, and the person also loses interest and lose respect in what they're doing, and then you just end up with like a bad situation with poor quality work. Know when to cut ties, know when to walk away, and know when to start over. Even though it might be hard to think that you have to spend money again, it's just better that way, because it's just so much better for you in the long run. The seventh thing is not to pay too much money up front. You can stick to maybe a 10% down payment to start the job, and then pay the contractor every time that a milestone is completed. So this may save you a lot of money in terms of paying him up front and then having him go do other jobs, or like what happened to me, him not showing up and then showing back up again when he spent the money on other jobs or what have you. Pay based on milestones versus based on a set period of time. So instead of paying every month just because you're paying every month, pay based on work that is completed. So what if the person breaks the contract? So if it's something like they're within the time frame that they're supposed to finish, but you're not happy with something that they're doing or their work, the first thing to do is speak to them directly and explain to them how you feel, because sometimes it could be just different, like a miscommunication, or maybe they chose a color or a material that you didn't think that they would. If it's something simple or if it's something big, speak to the person directly to see if you can resolve it that way. But if it's something major, like in my situation, make sure that you save all pictures, all text messages, all forms of communication, and seek legal advice if you do want to get your money back, or if it's if they damaged your property. Make sure that you have all these evidence so that you can take the necessary steps required to get your money back if that's what you choose to do. This was a very difficult story to share. I know listening to the story, you may think, how can she have trusted this person so long and not fire this person right away? There were so many red flags. So I share this story with you guys so that you don't go through what I experienced, especially for first-time home buyers, people who may be young, naive like myself, how I was during that time, or for people who have never worked with contractors before. Watch this video. It may save you a lot of money, and really take the time to do your due diligence, do your research, because choosing the wrong contractor for such a big project, it can really cost you a lot of money and a lot of mental, physical, emotional stress. So make sure that you take the time to do your research. The thing about making mistakes is that it makes you stronger, wiser, and it causes you so much pain that you know that you wouldn't make that same mistake again. I did have to hire another contractor, and it worked out very beautifully. It was a night and day situation. Guys, I share this story with you so that you can avoid making the same mistakes that I did. If you've had a very similar experience or a story of working with a bad contractor or a good contractor, please leave it in the comments below. If you find this information useful, please like, subscribe, and share it to a friend that is renovating their home, or share it with a person who is in the real estate investment and thinking about, buying a home of good value and like renovating the house. It might be very beneficial to them to hear my story and to hear the tips on how to avoid making mistakes and doing your due diligence when you're hiring a contractor. So thank you so much for watching my video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.